Hello, welcome to
Okay.
Responsible Chicken Breeding. My name's Karen, and I am not here with Jim Atkins. But luckily, another passionate poultryman, Jeff Mattocks, was willing to come and help me get through this hour. So,
It'll be a
Jim
good time.
is on vacation, but we get to do 30 full minutes of feed, and hopefully somebody will be interested. Um,
30 full minutes or 60?
oh yeah, see, 60.
Yeah.
Normally it would only be 30.
I was
But
gonna say, you cut me short.
yeah, no, we're skipping the breed because Jeff, neither Jeff nor I know enough about any one breed to make this to make it valuable enough for a breeder. So, well, Jeff may. I didn't mean to cut you down there, buddy. Yeah.
I don't. No.
All right.
I'm still learning these things.
All right. You got anything wonderful you want to share with us before we just start?
Probably, but it doesn't come to mind right at the moment. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It will. It will. Give it time.
Me neither. All right. Yeah. All right. So we are going to tackle 1.5 subjects today. I see. I'm not nervous. No problem. Everybody does different feeds. What are the normal? Here we go. I'll ask you. What are the normal feeds that people go through when they get chicks and adults?
If we're lucky, they do a chick starter, and then hardly anybody uses a grower. And then they just seem to take them right over to layer, and then they just kind of live on layer their entire life. That's what I see most growers doing out there. And they're missing out. They're not even halfway there to all the rations they should be using. But look, not all of these feeds are available for everyone who's going to listen to this. Okay. The more and more I work with breeder folks, I'm learning that there are a lot of feed deserts out there where we can't get the things that we really need.
So, all right. Well, and for everybody to know, Jeff doesn't really want to go into all of this because it scares people, but I really would like to just present it as this is the ideal, and you can make your own choices as to which ones are important for you to do. I went to probably 5 years worth of Jeff's classes before finally deciding I was ready to listen and see what I could do, see if I could actually make some changes. So I think it's okay to hear stuff and not act on it. But you can't know what you're missing if you never hear the information in the first place. So that's our goal today.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about this. Most people do get a chick starter, don't they?
They do. They do. And and chick starters are all over the place out there. You can find a chick starter, people label them as a chick starter starting at 18, and I've seen chick starters as high as 22, 23% protein. So they're all over the place. But for a heritage bird, for a breeding bird, where plumage and health and everything is critical, I would say at least 21, 22 is where I think you should be a good high quality chick starter.
All right. And in terms of how long you feed it, so we're going ideal here, right? We're not going for what the bag says. We're going for
yeah.
So your book, let's talk about that for half a second. So this is your 4th edition, right, of the pastured poultry feeding and management.
Yep.
So in your book, it has rations and designs for hybrid sort of pastured poultry egg laying birds for broilers, and then there's a section for standard bred poultry. So so in that we've got your chick starter down to the first third of development, right? So
yep. And people need to realize that is a recommendation, and not everybody's going to be able to find all those ingredients. So the other thing in the back, if you're really a numbers person, you're really nerdy, you can actually, there's enough information back there in the appendixes to design your own spreadsheet, build your own ration. There's enough information in there to keep you out of trouble. Yeah. And, so there's a few people that do that. I mean, they just want to try their hand at it, and that's fine. And if you do that, shoot it over to me. Let me take a look at it before you actually start feeding it and killing birds. I don't want you to have a bad experience. And I can make corrections. I can give you suggestions, whatever. And I'm happy to do that.
And I should probably say, just in case it comes up, that like I said, I was feeding bag feed from the store until I went all the way over. I decided I needed to be actually in control of what it is because I wanted to do it. So I went all the way over to making my own feed from the ingredients. So for the first year, I used the recipes in your book exactly. And then I finally got up the nerve to ask you to check them out for my specific breeds. And so you made some tweaks.
Yeah. Wasn't painful at all, was it?
No, it was very easy to.
Yeah. You asked, and a couple of days later, I gave you the rations you asked for.
Right.
So
that's right. So it's not. But if you didn't, the ones in your book, I'm assuming you aren't terrible, or you wouldn't have put them there. So
no, they'll work. They'll work perfectly fine. But each breed, and also the poultry person who's keeping those birds, they have specific goals in mind. So I need to know what the standard is for that breed, what you're trying to get, out of it. What are your goals? Are you going to be showing them? Are you just going to be breeding them? Are you, all those things make a little difference in this level, like methionine, lysine, etc. They all make a little bit of a difference. So.
All right, Jeff, we're going to take a second here. I have a link to your book, but they can't buy it from Fertrella online right now, can they?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is just email or call. They can email Nicole at info@fertrella.com, and she'll take the order over the phone. Yes, we can still ship it out, but right now with the manpower shortage, people not necessarily wanting to work because it makes more money to sit at home, then we are very shorthanded right now. So we're a little slow. We're getting it done, but we are a little slower than usual.
Okay, but all right. So the critical part of all this is the book and any recipes you do are not going to exactly tell you what week to feed it to because of in heritage birds. There's a huge difference between 14-week development in Delawares to 18 weeks in Barred Rocks and Australorps, and my Rhode Island Reds I think of as a 22-week-old bird is the good time for butchering. So that's the time frame you're talking about, right? Knowing
exactly. Yeah. Okay. So people need to know, if they're a breeder, they need to know, okay, when does their breed mature? Okay. Now what somebody tells you, you need to know when your breed, you feel that it has actually hit maturity. And that's based on body weight, comb development, feathering, shape, conformation, etc. And then you divide that into thirds. So we have 3 different rations. We have the starter, grower, and developer, right? So there's even some breeds out there, and the name's not coming right to my head, but there's some that are closer to 28 or even 30 weeks to get to that full maturing.
More Jersey Giants and those sorts of things.
Yeah. And then, people that are listening, it takes, 42 weeks to get, 30 to 40 weeks to get like a turkey. Some of the turkeys fully developed and in good shape for breeding. So.
And we're not talking about till the bird's done growing. I mean, that's going to be over a year till it matures out and fills out. But we're just talking that sort of until you would butcher, right? So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So then we move on to the chick grower. So for me and my birds, we're looking at about 7.5 weeks that I'm going to switch over to that. So what's different about the grower from the starter?
So we're bringing the protein level down. There's no need to feed them that excessive amount of protein. And we're bringing the energy level up slightly in this point. We'll also bring the fiber levels up a little bit at this point. In the chick starter, we want to kind of make it as nutrient dense as we can. And we want to remove a lot of the inhibitors that would keep a chick from eating all that it wants. Okay. So now in the grower stage, we don't necessarily want them overeating, but we want to meet their nutritional needs. And so this is where, you're coming down from that 21% starter. I'm just using that as a ballpark, to probably an 18 to 19% grower diet. All that extra protein that, if you left them on the starter, you're just passing it through as urate in the end. And it's really not benefiting the bird whatsoever. If anything, it's probably antagonizing the kidneys, and the renal systems to get rid of it. So, it waste of money and a pain for the chicken. So,
all right. So then the third quarter we're looking at. So for me, by this time, actually before this, but by 8 weeks at the very latest, I would have my boys and my girls separated from each other so that they could grow out a little bit differently, a little bit more calm, to have them separated out. So I'm feeding chick grower to both groups, but then once we hit, for me, 15-ish weeks, I switch and feed them differently based on whether they're a pullet or a cockerel.
Yeah, and again, this is a target because some, some folks are doing that culling. They've got a pretty good idea by 10 or 12 weeks who they're going to keep and who they're not going to keep.
Mm-hmm.
So the birds that you can call out to raise for meat or whatever, give to friends and family, whatever you do with your extra birds, is there's no need to keep feeding them that higher quality diet. Okay. There's no need to have that expense in it. So, whenever your culling process takes place, then you would switch over. But I'd like for it to be in that 12, 13, 14's dragging it out a little bit long weeks. Well, look, again, we're dropping the protein again. So I don't want that extra protein in there continuing to, do anything antagonistic to the kidneys, to internal development. Don't need that excess urate, don't need the ammonia smell in wherever the chicks are being housed. So making these changes, helps in multiple different ways. Now in this one, again, we have a slight energy change. We're bringing the protein down again, and I'm bringing the fiber up also in the developer feeds. Now this is where you make the choice of going over for meat production or whatever you do with your culls. And these birds, all right, this is a critical period where we don't want them to overeat. We don't want them to put on body fat. Okay. Most commercial diets are really high in energy. They're going to run 1,450 kilocalories per pound. These pullet and cockerel developers are going to be down just under 1,300. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it is, in the realm of a chicken, that's a lot. Okay. And having the extra fiber going to slow down that digestive tract just a little bit, so they're getting more nutrients absorbed. It's kind of complex. I don't need to go down all the rabbit holes, but it is a very important part of, this is the part that brings them up to sexual maturity and gets them in fine shape to be a layer or a breeder. So this is, starter and developer, in my opinion, are actually more important than the grower phase, significantly more important than the grower phase. And
so if you were going to cut one of those out, if you said, I can figure out how to do 2 of these, but not 3, then.
And actually, if you have a little bit of starter left over, you can mix some starter with some developer and you end up with grower. Okay. You can go 50-50 and have a grower feed and it works just fine. All right.
And this may be too technical, but what are the differences in pullet and cockerel? What are we doing differently in those 2 feeds?
So it's just, I'm splitting hairs, right? I'm being overly scientific when I have those 2. A person could have one developer feed for both. Again, I'm keeping the energies are a little bit different. The proteins, I think, are about a half a point different. It's right. And then the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't really make a big difference. But for a person who likes to measure things with micrometers and get into the details, it does actually make a difference. It's a lot of work. So
they're separated at that point. And like I said, since I'm mixing everything from scratch, it doesn't, I mean, I could, it's no harder to measure 13 pounds of something or 14 pounds of something into my mix. I mean, so once year, but.
So have you've been doing this now for over a year. I mean,
it's been a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you seeing the benefits? I mean, are you liking what you're doing?
I'm liking it.
Okay.
They definitely eat better. They eat less than they used to, or they waste less. I'm not quite sure which one is happening, whether they're, but I'm going through less feed than I was by almost 25% than what I used to feed.
Yeah.
So it's more, obviously there's a cost to getting started, but it's not a lot for me and how I ended up doing it. You're either paying for a grinder of some sort and then a way to mix it together. So for me, that's a concrete mixer that wasn't very expensive. And instead of a hammer mill or a roller mill, I went with making it into pellets instead. So I could skip that step. So, you're talking, let's say, with the pellet mill choice, you're talking about $3,000 on equipment. And then I've been able to make my own feed. And I don't feel like it's much more expensive than buying it. But it's not cheaper. I don't want to tell anyone it's cheaper. It's just.
No, but eventually it will be.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, are you seeing the performance difference? I mean, are you seeing differences in the birds?
Yes. My hatching is better. My weights are better. They're actually weigh less. Like, I know it sounds like I said they eat less and now they weigh less, but there's less fat on them than there was before. And I don't feel like I have to ration their feed as much as I used to. I used to have to be like, I have to be very specific about only giving them a certain amount in order to stop that abdominal fat from building up. And now I feel like, there'll still be some feed there and they ration themselves, which is much easier for me than, just like eating healthy for a human, right? It's you can eat a lot of healthy food or you can eat a very small amount of unhealthy food. So.
Right. And that's what, that was the goal. That's what I hoped that you would see. Yeah. And if we're hitting the energy, protein, everything, if we're hitting all the numbers really right, then, they're going to be satisfied with what you give them, maybe a little bit left over, but nothing significant. But the performance is still there. So.
All right. So now they're whatever weeks you expect, you're past butchering age, you have some males and more females probably. So for this example, I'm going to assume that we're talking to breeders here, so that most people are not breeding during that pullet year. So the birds are all going to start laying eggs, but you're not hatching those eggs yet. So my guess is we go to a layer diet.
Yeah, I would. Actually, if you're looking at the timing of this, you hatched them in the spring. Now you're looking at July or August, you're going to start seeing, depending on when you hatched, even September, you're going to start seeing the first eggs out of these bullets. They're going to end up as table eggs. Now look, the breeder diet doesn't make the best table eggs, right? Because it's got things in there like fish meal and, so the flavor of the egg in the breeders is not going to be as good as a layer diet. So this is a good opportunity. You can sell some eggs, you can stockpile some eggs, you can eat a lot of eggs, whatever you do. And so here you want a good high quality, but just a standard 16, 17% layer diet, or even an 18% layer diet, depending on where you are, temperatures, etc. It's, but there's no need to put in all those fancy extras to make a breeder diet at this point.
Okay. So if I was using your book and there's in the standard bred section, there's nothing about layer that doesn't have the word breeder in it. So would I go to the rations for pastured poultry for the hybrid layers? Is that where I'd get my layer diet from?
Yeah, that's fine.
Or you ask Jeff, but
Yeah.
everybody in the whole world can't ask Jeff, or you would never get any sleep. So that's why. All right. So, but everybody always asks, when do you start the laying diet? Do you start it at a certain? Do you
The
wait
breeder
for?
diet?
No, the layer. When,
Oh.
like, when do you the pullet developer to the layer? Do you wait for that first egg from the first hen? Do you?
Usually, most people just wait for the first egg, to appear. That's your sign that they've hit sexual maturity, and they're ready to start laying. So I would say first egg is good as anything. You can also get to the end of your 3 sections of development and switch over to layer at that point too. Provided you've hit the right 22 weeks in your case, or whatever your breed's supposed to be for maturing. So if you run out of developer feed at 21 and a half weeks, right, in your case, and it's fine, that half a week of starting them on layer feed is not going to make a big difference, right? Now, if you were 2 weeks early and you ran out of developer feed, then I wouldn't be ready yet. But a few days here or there, one way or the other, isn't going to make a big difference.
And this is repeating refrain from Jeff to me is, it's not that big a deal, Karen. Just whatever works. There has to be some practicality in it. Yep.
All right. There's plenty of things that are big deals in poultry nutrition. There really are. But a couple days isn't it, right? But getting your nutritional levels right, making sure that you're hitting their needs, exceeding. I got to quit saying meeting their needs. You want to actually, for breeders, you want to be exceeding their needs more so on the vitamin and the amino acid sides. Okay. Not on the calcium, phosphorus, and a lot of the trace mineral type stuff, but, yeah.
So this theoretical bird now is laying eggs, and it's its first year, so it's going to lay basically until it molts, right? That's the next stage of life for a bird.
Yeah. And, this is a natural occurrence, and to me, the natural time for a bird to molt is usually September, October. That doesn't work for everybody. People in the show circuit who are doing fairs and things like that, or poultry shows, they probably need to molt earlier, right? If they're taking their birds for exhibition purposes, they're going to want to molt, probably June, July, and get that bird turned around, get the plumage back, and be looking good. But I think, to me, the natural occurrence for molt is when the days start declining. So it's somewhere in that August, September, even into early October, and then want to get plumage back on them before winter hits.
So, and Jeff is going to talk about this in a are you talking about this on Kenny's show? Are you going to talk about molting?
Yes.
Eventually.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So they'll have a whole show about it, but, but the big key when you're doing the molting diet. So what is in a molting diet? Are we upping the protein, lowering it, switching everything?
Yeah, we're switching everything. So in a molting diet, really high fiber, really low energy, bringing that energy down to around 1,000 kilocalories per pound. And for the listeners, that doesn't mean anything. Okay. But it's a reference point. Earlier, we were talking about 1,400. Now we're down to 1,000. That means the hen's getting about 250 calories a day when she normally is getting 350 or 400, depending on the size of the bird. So we're bringing the fiber up, protein down, energy down, and we're also loading her up with calcium. So more so for the hens. Now, if you want to feed your molting diet to your roosters and your hens, make the molting diet without all the additional calcium in it, right? So the cockerels can be used for the cockerels as well. Then the hens would be just free choice oyster shell, all she wants. Don't let it run empty, because you're going to feed them about 3 ounces of this molting feed a day. And by doing that, we're going to reduce body weight. Older, like 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old hens should be losing somewhere around 15 to 20% of their body weight during the molt. Very normal process. It helps reduce the ovary size back down to like pullet weight, when she was a pullet. So when she comes back into production, her egg size isn't totally enormous and out of range. It's a good egg weight for setting or for hatching. That's kind of the purpose of the molting. If we just kind of let them do their own thing, they're just not. They're going to have a whole bunch of internal fat. And a mutual friend that you and I both have sent me pictures. I could have taken almost a whole pound of hard yellow fat that was inside the abdominal area and chest cavity. I mean, there was just literally that much hard, butter yellow fat in there. And that bird can never be productive, right? Just never going to be. She's going to be productive. She's not going to be cost effective productive. How's that? You're not going to get the number of eggs out of her that you want. Her hatchability is not going to be that high. You're going to see a reduced hatchability.
Well, and I know they're not people, but is there any chance that hen also isn't the most comfortable, happy, healthy as she could be if she didn't carry around an extra pound of abdominal fat?
Oh yeah. I mean,
it's not just about
right.
Money. It's about it's about making your birds as healthy as they can be. I would say,
right. But hens, chickens, poultry in general tend to be a very greedy creature, and they take advantage of the opportunity to overeat as often as they can. And so that's why we need to be better stewards and take care of them and keep this under control.
Yeah. Right? So just in molting, I'd like to always just say it that, we act like if we just let hens do whatever they want, that's the most natural thing that could happen. But, nature does not provide them with an equal amount of food every single day in the wild so that they never have to look for it. Natural is to practically starve your hens in the fall because there's no greenery available and there's no bugs that are left alive and there's no that's what nature does. So if we want to emulate nature, then we got to do something different during that time frame than the same thing you do all year round. So
yeah, in the northern hemispheres, we're completely out of sync with nature because, like you said, by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, all your insects are gone. Everything's frosted down. Now you're just looking for the occasional acorn or seed or something like that, which is a basic carbohydrate, but there's not much of that around. So they would lose all their weight through the winter, and they'd be living on that stored fat until spring rolled around. Everything greens up. Bugs come out, they eat some grass, they eat some bugs, and they start
have
laying
babies.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So if we finish the molting diet, they've lost the perfect amount of weight, which never happens, but okay. No. And their feathers are beautiful. And I'd say depending on their age is what you're going to feed next, right? So if in coming out of that first year's or the first molt, those hens may go back into production even with the waning daylight. But in my experience, my 4-year-old hens are not going to start laying again until the daylight starts increasing. So depending on when the molt happened and all that. So I've been going on to a holding diet after molt because I'm not really expecting most of my birds, because most of my birds are not juvenile, are not pre-breeding. So I don't really expect them to start laying eggs, but I wondered if is there any chance I'm lowering my egg count per year by putting them on a holding diet versus back onto a layer diet?
No, that holding diet is still going to be 14.5%, 15% protein, somewhere in there, right? It's not, but we're still making sure. I hate to keep talking about protein. We're making sure that we have the right amino acids, which the amino acids are actually what is preparing the egg follicles for the next season. It's not about the total protein, right? So we're trying to manage, keep her body weight down, keep her comfortable, keep her happy. As long as those amino acids and the vitamin levels are correct, then we're building eggs. Okay. It's, people think that protein and egg production are tied together. And they are to a certain extent, but it's not as critical, feeding a layer diet from the time you come out of the molt till the breeding season is actually stressful on the hen. And she doesn't need all that extra. If she's not laying eggs, she doesn't need all that extra calcium, right? So now she's got to deal with it, figure out how to pass it off, what she's going to do with it. And she doesn't need all the energy that goes along with a layer diet. So, you know your flock, and like you said, your 4-year-olds, hey, when you get done with the molt here in July or August, whenever it happens, September, October, November, December, they're basically, on semi-retirement until you make them go to work again, right? And then
that's what I expect. Honestly, almost 2 weeks after, usually January 10th is my first eggs coming out. You know what I mean? Just right after the sun switches over after the equinox is when I feel like, so that's when I've been switching for me to, I'll just click here to the breeder layer. So, because that's basically when I, but maybe for my 1 year, anybody who starts laying again in the fall, maybe I'll start giving them that layer feed just to support them a little better with the calcium and stuff.
Right. If they're laying eggs, they need that extra calcium, they need that extra vitamins, they need the extra nutrients.
Okay.
If they're not, if they're taking a break on you, then don't feed all that extra stuff. Or
if they're a breed that is a seasonal layer that isn't expected to be laying, then yeah. All right. So now we get into breeder layer, which is the thing that nobody knows and nobody does. And what's the difference between the stuff off the shelf and the?
Oh man.
I know. I'm sorry.
you know the difference, but anyway. So again, if people want to contact me, I'll send them specs for what breeder feeds are. But just simply, like vitamin A, for instance, store-bought feed going to be 3,000, 3,300. In a breeder feed, vitamin A should be 6,500 to 7,000 units per pound. Okay. Store-bought feed, vitamin E is going to be 10 to 15. In a breeder feed, it's going to be 50 to 100 IUs per pound. Vitamin D, store-bought feed, 1,000 to 1,500 units per pound. In a breeder feed, 2,500 to 3,000. Okay. Just methionine, first limiting amino acid for poultry. Store-bought feed, going to be 0.38, 0.4. In a breeder feed, should be 0.48 to 0.5. Okay. And I know that doesn't sound like a big difference, but in the world of a chicken, that's huge. It is huge. Lysine, store-bought feed, 0.9, 1%. Breeder feed, 1.1, 1.2. Again, 10, 15% higher. And there's just way too much byproducts and fillers and junk and in store-bought feeds and that are not benefiting your birds whatsoever. So
I'm having a technical problem in that I cannot find my cursor on my screen. So
I don't see it either.
There it is. Yeah, I just had to click somewhere, but if I clicked, all right. And I did not, this is terrible, but I did not upload a picture of your supplement. But can we talk about your supplement now? Because that is one of the only ways I know for people to. Yeah. So you talk, and I'll try to find a picture. Yeah.
So people that are not able to make their own feed or have enough birds to get a custom feed made for them. About a year ago, July will be a year, I come up with a crazy idea. So I loaded in the nutrient levels of, common store-bought, locally available layer feeds. And then I started adding nutrients to that until I got it to a layer standard nutrient level. And so I come up with the Fertrell poultry show and breeder supplement, 40%.
See, I got it behind us. That's not great. Yeah, we'll do better. Yeah.
Right. But, it's primarily a fish meal protein. with added lysine, added methionine, and a lot of added vitamins to it. And Karen's going to pop it up here any second so
Yep,
you can
yep.
all see it. Comes out to about,
And thanks to Kenny Troiano's Bread to Perfection live stream, where these graphics come from. I am stealing them directly from him, but this is the Fertrell label. So, all right, now you can talk. Yeah.
Yeah. So, 40% protein, really high vitamins. You guys can zoom in on the picture and you'll be able to see, much more detail as far as what's in there. I'm not hiding anything in probiotics, trace minerals, all the B vitamins, along with first ingredient is fish meal, right? And a second ingredient is kelp meal. So if you don't know the benefits of kelp meal, then, it's bringing a lot of micronutrients that we don't even know about yet out of seaweed into the feed. Great product. But so you feed 1 teaspoon per bird per day, and you can mix it up ahead of time with your feed. There's also a YouTube video Kenny did on how to mix it with your feed. So you can mix it up with your feed ahead of feeding. 1 teaspoon per adult bird per day comes out to 3 cents per chicken per day. And you would only want to give it to your breeding flock. You don't want to give it to your meat birds, your culls, people that, the birds that you're not going to be harvesting eggs from. So it'll help keep the cost down. There's 150 servings per pound. Comes in a 10-pound bag or a 40-pound bag. 10-pound bag is $49 shipped anywhere in the US. And the 40-pound bag is $149 shipped anywhere in the US. That is, the shipping is included in those prices. Again, temporarily, our online shopping site is down because we're short on people. But you're welcome to call in or email info@fertrell.com. You can get books, you can get supplements shipped to you, whatever you want. If we slow down a little bit, I'll be back at my desk full time. You can, you can also ask for Jeff, and I'll be happy to try and help you out.
But that is a way to take layer feed and make it into breeder layer.
Exactly.
So that is the one that is actually sort of doable now. Some of those other ones we talked about before, the pullet developer and cockerel developer, that's still a bit of a challenge, but
it is.
But the breeder layer is doable. So I wanted to make sure people knew how. So,
yep.
All right. So again, we're talking me here. So I am I'm hatching for my own use at this point. 2021, I was not shipping anywhere. I did not trust the U.S. Post Office with any lives. So I hatched very little for other people, just the people who are willing to come and pick them up. So I stopped hatching much earlier this year. So I needed to do something in between because I don't want to stay on breeder layer longer than the birds need. And I want to eat my eggs. They're delicious, usually. So I went to the layered diet after I stopped hatching. But if you hatch as much as you can, you'd be then going to a holding diet when you're done.
Again, if they're still laying eggs, they still need a layer diet, right? Okay. And then when they've stopped laying eggs somewhere in that next 30 days, 30 days more extra on a layer diet isn't going to hurt them.
Right.
They're just rebuilding their bones. They're putting calcium back in body storage. So, but then you do need to think about a holding diet, just to kind of maintain them, keep them healthy, but not pushing any production, not expecting any eggs, So it's not a particular, it's basically when the eggs quit, then, make that changeover.
So that's all I got. Those are all the different, there's not that many different, then you repeat for the rest of their lives, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, we talked about
starter, but
we talked about 6 different rations, in essence, if you count the molting and the holding diet. So you got starter, grower, developer, then you got layer or breeder,
or meat bird. Yeah.
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 Right.
No. Well, you're right. It does sound overwhelming if you don't know how to make them all.
Right.
But if you just grab a couple of barrels, you can magically do it. But yeah, I'm teasing.
Well,
We'll
you got
talk
to remember,
about that sometime. Yeah.
I would guess that the majority of people listening to the show, right, have never even thought that there was such a thing as a developer or what's a holding feed, I mean, and a molt ration. They've never heard. You
Well,
don't
that's
go
not
to.
true. The Purina or Nutrient, whoever makes that feather fixer, has
Okay.
put in people's minds that it's important to change the diet during molt. But I think what they're doing is almost the exact opposite of what you're doing during the molt. I think
So
they up
that,
the protein. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but they're assuming that the bird molted correctly, right? That, you know what I mean? They're
Well, they're
assuming
trying to
that,
put the feathers back on the second they come off.
yeah,
Like,
right. Well, and let's not blame them. They're giving them what people want, right? So as soon as the feathers come off and your chickens look ugly, it's like, oh God, they're horrible. I want to fix this, right? So you want to feed them that higher protein. You want to get feathers back on them right away, but you didn't do the body weight loss. So there's, you didn't really do an effective molt. All you did is recycle feathers. You're not, from a breeding standpoint, you did not do her any favors whatsoever.
all right. I didn't know if we'd get here, but we're making decent time. So I'm going to make you talk temperature because
Okay.
that's one more, one more thing that this is what I'm going through right now is.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Talk about how much they eat time of year. Yeah.
Yeah. Several years ago, I work with people all the way from Florida, even down into the Bahamas, et cetera, and all the way up to the Arctic Circle. So, over the years, I'm learning this isn't printed in a book anywhere that I've ever seen, right? So I kind of developed this based on the best knowledge that I had of, what the energy needs, calories consumed, et cetera, for those birds are going to be, right? And so, this is kind of what we expect, just based on the temperature fluctuations. So usually we build a layer ration around that 70 degree mark, so you see 68, 70 degrees. I build a 17% layer ration. So, but as the temperatures get hotter, her need for calories will go down. And everybody I talk to in the chicken world sees the same thing, right? They're eating less. Their birds become lethargic. The egg size will start to go down for people who are a full-time, egg laying. So if we don't make adjustments and increase the protein as the temperatures go up, then our egg size drops or our egg production quits. So that's, you can trigger a molt with the heat of summer, simply by not adjusting the feeds. So I come up with this temperature chart, like I said, probably about 5-6 years ago. It kind of explains to you, don't take this as, gospel truth or whatever written in stone. This is an estimation, okay, based on my observations. But, this is based on a 4-pound bird, like a red sex link commercial type layer. And so, if you're down around 0-5 degrees, she's going to eat, she's going to only eat around 6 ounces of feed. So by doing that, if she's eating that 6 ounces, which is fine, she can eat the 6 ounces, right? Because she needs that 456 calories to feel comfortable at 5 degrees. So, but the crude protein or the protein of that feed only needs to be 12.5% to get a large, extra large egg. Now we take that to the other extreme, and people are already starting to call me, out of Central California saying, oh, our summers are horrible, 110, 120 degrees. Well, the most you're going to get in those birds is 200, 225 calories, which is going to be 2.6, 2.8, ounces of feed for, again, that 4.5 pound bird. Well, if you still wanted them to lay eggs in that weather, we would want to be feeding a 24 to 27% protein to keep that large, extra large egg, to keep the right egg size. So this is just kind of a reference, and I can send it to you. You can screenshot it, whatever you want to do with it.
It's in the book.
It's out there as public information. So, it's not like I've got it copyrighted, patented, or anything like that. So just it gives you a better understanding of why your birds are doing what they're doing as you see the temperatures or the seasons of the year, rotating around, and you see different aspects of your birds, right? This may help you understand what's going on. At the same time, you may want to be able to figure out a way to fluctuate your protein and your amino acids based on the seasons, because it's constantly changing. Now, I'm not saying every time you move 10 degrees that you need to make this change. I am saying that in the winter, you need to have a feed for winter feeding. In the heat of summer, you need to have a summer feed if you expect production. And your spring and your fall feeds are going to be very similar to each other. You're probably going to be 17, 18% is where you want to be for your summer, for your spring and your fall. And you can drop down into that 12, 13, 14, depending on how cold your winters go. So you can look, you can look at the chart. You can see what your temperatures are. The temperature is a 24-hour average. So you take your daytime high and your nighttime low, add the two together, divide by 2, and that'll give you the number that I'm referring to, on the far left of this chart.
Yeah. In North Carolina, I basically use from the 41 degrees to the 86. I never do anything over because of the 24-hour thing. Do you know what I mean? That it always seems to get up, to stay at 86 average all day long. That, like you said, it would have to be in the 110s during the day. Do you know what I mean? So,
right.
Yeah. But what about not just in production of eggs, but what would happen to that at 14 degrees? Okay, what happens if you're still feeding the 18 or 17% layer feed? How much weight is that bird gaining?
No, it's not how much weight she's gaining. It's the size of the eggs, right?
Okay, so it's only about the eggs. There's not eating 800 calories at that point isn't a problem. But
well, I mean, she's still, yes, she's gonna, chickens eat for their energy needs on a daily basis. Okay. So somehow in that small pea-sized brain that they have, they know that they need to eat this much to stay warm and comfortable. Okay. So that's what they're going to eat for. What happens is you stay on that 17, 18, even 16%, and then you get down in those teens, and you're letting them eat whatever they want to eat. The egg size is going to go up. So I get these calls every winter, right? Oh, all my eggs are extra large and jumbos. And I'm like, well, you didn't adjust your feed, you dummy. So it's like.
And the heat or the cold one isn't as hard, right? That's the scratch grain, like right. Supplementing with.
Yeah. So if you're buying a 17% or an 18% layer feed, at your local feed store, wherever that is, instead of feeding them more feed, do some adjustments by just feeding some extra scratch grain. The hard one is when you get hot. Coming right into the heat of summer right now is you don't have a good way to add protein. You can't just up the protein and keep everything in balance. I mean, you can, but you have to be willing to go the extra mile and get what you need.
Can the supplement help with that at all, even if we're not breeding?
It does, because it's protein, but it's a small amount of protein. It's not a huge amount of protein. Okay. That was actually more of an amino acid balancer, and vitamin balancer, and we're just kind of rolling out the 35% protein pellet, and that has the added vitamins and amino acids in it as well. We haven't got it to store shelves. Of course, we don't sell on store shelves, but we're rolling it out and people are using it. Feedback is good. And
What
If
about
somebody's, huh?
what about the minerals and the lysine and methionine up at the 80 at the 95 degrees? Like, are they eating so little feed that now they don't have enough minerals? And is there any of that deprivation
Yeah,
going on?
there is. I mean, there's deprivation across the board. And that's where if you could supplement with the 35% protein pellet, which has the fish, has some roasted soy, has some soybean meal in it. So, but you're not getting a lot of energy. You're just getting a lot of, you're getting a lot of protein out of it. But it also has the vitamins and minerals to make that compensation, right? So
Because
that
most of the
would
things
be
people add to add protein are just protein, right?
right. Yeah.
Like, so that's
Yeah.
what whenever people talk about fermenting, I just like, does fermenting your feed magically give it twice as much of the minerals that they need? If you're going to feed
No,
half as much food, does it?
no, it
I
doesn't.
mean, I'm not sure.
It
So,
doesn't, but I'm not going to burst their bubble.
all
Just
right.
let them do what they're going to do. So,
So
yeah.
a midsummer molt means that something is perhaps not going right in the feeding department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they're just not getting enough nutrients. I mean, they're just not going to eat. The calories are getting in the way of how much feed they're taking in, and they're not going to change that. I mean, they're not going to, they're hot and they're miserable. And, if it wasn't for air conditioning in the middle of the summer, I don't eat as much either. So, yeah.
I think I still don't eat as much in the summer as. All right, so this is what we were supposed to talk to Jeff about, and now I'm going to rush him through it. But but I would, if I didn't do anything different, like I said, in all those first years for my boys, but I have now learned that perhaps layer feed long term for your males is not the most productive way to grow them out. What do you
Yeah.
think?
And are you doing group mating or single mating or all the
So
above? Or, I
all the
mean,
above. Let's just say
okay.
that. So
Yeah.
I don't have, even when I'm single mating, my boys tend to be in with the girls for the day. So they're not
Yeah.
getting their own feed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And then and every breeder is going to be different. Are you taking it out? Are you taking him out with that hen? Is he going back to the bachelor pad or is he going to the next hen? So, it's all variable. Look, 60 or 90 days of eating layer feed is not going to hurt him. Okay. It's okay. Right. Once your breeding season's over, your breeding window's over, then get him back on. I would put him on the cockerel developer, formula, or back on the grower feed, something like that, with the lower calcium level. That would just be his maintenance feed. So you can't expect people to make their own custom cockerel feed, right? Not their breeding. It's just not.
well, and how would you stop your, I would say, yeah. So housing them separately,
Right.
or what do they do commercially? I think they have feeders that the boys can't get their heads into.
Yep. Exactly. They got a double stack feeder, and down here the opening's big enough for a hen to get in and eat, but because of his comb and his head size, he can't. And then above that is a feeder with a much larger opening that he's comfortable eating in. And that's so, yeah, like in the large commercial outfits, they have cockerel feeders, they have rooster feed and they have hen feed. They got 2 bins sitting outside for that purpose.
So if you're not, but if somebody's doing layer feed year round, for the rest of that bird's life is what I would say is, you do the chick starter stuff and then you feed them layer feed for the rest of their life.
Yep.
What does that show in the boy? I mean, are there certain illnesses or?
Well, you're not going to see it. I mean, it's not like you're going to see any external or activity differences. You're just getting calcium buildup in the kidneys and a lot of extra urate. And people that are feeding a pelleted feed, and I'm not picking on you, Karen, but people feeding a pelleted feed where their calcium is included in that pellet, he doesn't have a choice but to eat that calcium, right? Whereas in a mash feed where we have oyster shell in there, he won't eat the oyster shell, right? He'll eat around it. He'll eat everything but the oyster shell, because he can tell the difference at that point. That's one of the few drawbacks to pellets in my mind is, you just don't have that separation. So, but
if somebody's getting a Scratch and Peck or a New Country Organic or a Modesta Milling or a Rosetta Sun or whatever, I'm not gonna Rosica Sun. I don't know.
Osaka, yeah.
There you go. Is their calcium provided by oyster shell, or are they still putting the calcium limestone?
It's all over the place. They're all a little bit different. The majority of them, to help keep costs down, are using ground limestone or limestone chips as their calcium source. On paper, in a university or in a laboratory testing where they use ammonium acetate to extract their nutrients, which there's no ammonium acetate in a chicken's gut. But anyway, so
How we figure it out.
right. So the total calcium in limestone is anywhere from 36 to 38%. Well, the total calcium in an oyster shell is right around 38%. So in a laboratory testing, right, every time you convert birds from ground limestone to pre-digested calcium, we always see an improvement in eggshell quality. I think I see an improvement in bird health, but I can't prove that. So again, that's my observation. But calcium is a really important nutrient, no matter what the level, whether it's 1% or 4% for layers. Calcium is a critical nutrient. So, having a good quality calcium is important.
In previous version, I didn't actually have version 3, so I can't tell you when it changed, but your rations went from including limestone to oregonite.
Oregonite.
Yeah.
So for trail for years is used, brought in a calcium source. It's actually a renewable calcium source that comes out of the Bahamas. Anybody who's been to the Bahamas saw those white sandy beaches. Those are all comprised of seashell and coral fragments that the Gulf Stream drops off as it goes around the tip of Florida. So it naturally precipitates out and it's left there, by the Gulf Stream. And so we simply harvest it. It's nothing more than scooping it up and letting it dry and bringing it up to the U.S. So instead of digging another hole in the ground somewhere, we like this source. Plus, it's been pre-digested. It's equal to or better than oyster shell. And like I said, it's a renewable resource. So
I feel like oregonite in my gardening days, I feel like that was is that not something? No, that's azomite. See, no, I'm gonna.
No, and oregonite. We like oregonite. Yeah. Yeah. We use oregonite in all of our fertilizers as well. So,
okay. So, yeah. Okay. So if they were using oyster shells, then you can have less in the mashes. Okay. I hear you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the calcium needs for, let's see, in the cockerel, I'll just put this back. We're not going to go all through all this, but let me just get a few of these on. So everybody knows, I'm pretty sure everybody knows, less in the chick starters, right? You don't want to start your chicks off on
yeah, pretty much your chick starter, your chick grower, and your cockerel developer all need to be between 1.1 to 1.25. And that's a range, okay? Don't get hung up on the numbers. Somewhere close to, for sure above 1, not above 1.5. So if you're at 1.25, again, it depends on the quality of the calcium. So anywhere from 1 to 1.5, you're fine. You're not doing any kidney damage. You're not having any problems. So it's not,
So basically, if the bird is not laying an egg, it doesn't need more than, it should stay between 1 and 1.5.
Right.
Okay. Yep. So and the boys never lay eggs. So the boys technically
should always be at that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but layer is, the one, like I said, in your book, you're at 3.63%. Mm-hmm. Is that pretty typical? Or do off-the-shelf feeds tend to have enough calcium?
Oh, calcium's cheap, so they tend to be over on calcium. You'll see a lot of 4%. Okay. The acceptable calcium range is 3.3 at the bottom, 4.5, 4.25, somewhere a little over 4 is fine. Then in the molting diet, we want to do a lot of bone repair. So we're going to run at 5%, anywhere from 5 to 10% of the diet as calcium. I prefer to keep the calcium out of the feed at this point and let it be free choice. Then you can use the molting diet for both the cockerels and the hens. But if you add the calcium to the feed, then you're pretty much a hen-only molting feed.
Okay. And then you're up in the 8%. Was that?
Yep.
Okay.
8 to 10%.
Okay. But no matter what, after that, you want to, if they're not laying eggs, I know I keep saying it, but if they're not laying eggs, you want to go back down for both the boys and the girls.
Right.
You need to get back down to
somewhere around that 1.5% is fine. 1.2, 1.5, anywhere in there. You don't need to be above. 1.67, again, we're splitting hairs, not a big difference. Okay.
Yeah.
But don't want to be over 2 for sure.
How long can the boys eat? They're going to get layer feed. It's going to happen. Okay. Yeah. How many, if you're only feed, but if you have a young bird that's productive for 9 months out of the year and she's getting laying feed, then I'm assuming, is that shortening the life at all of the males?
Like it is. You're gradually deteriorating the kidney and urate functions, the renal functions. You're just gradually kind of just interrupting those. And so I think you're going to lose 1 to 2 years of productive life on a cockerel by feeding him layer feed all the time, or even feeding your hen layer feed year round. Okay. I think, there's a little bit to lose at the end, but if you consider, let's say worst case scenario, 2 years, right? And, what's the longest you've kept a hen? 8 years?
I haven't been in this that long yet. So,
okay.
But yes, but 6 years I've got 6-year-olds out there now. So,
yeah. But talking to other breeders, right? You kind of you're hitting the end of your productive life at 6, 6th lay cycle. It's hard to justify keeping her past that. Could we have gotten another year or 2 out of her by doing all these weird and fancy rations, right? It's I think so. I think, I think 20%, I think we could extend the productive life of our hens and our cockerels by 20% if we want to put the extra effort into, making the feeds as perfect as possible.
Listening to Kenny talk about his game fowl and how the boys are this last Saturday, the boys are able to reproduce for many years longer than the females. And I'm like, that is the exact opposite of my large fowl domestic breeder in my Rhode Island Reds. I get 4 years out of my males without too much trouble, but anything after that, it's really hit or miss whether I get anything out of them anymore. So
I'd be curious what your body weights are doing.
Getting heavier every year. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we can stop that by a good hard molt, then can you match the two together? I think the way nature intended it for it is the hens and the cockerels should expire or lose their functionality at about the same ages. Okay. That's just the way I see it. Not just an opinion. I have no facts to support that. That's just my theory. Okay. So I don't want any hate mail after the fact. So
when and you talk so much about what happens to them as baby chicks, and that nutrition affects them for the rest of their lives. So I am just starting, I started making my own feed in December of 2019. So I feel like I'm not really going to see a result on my 5-year-old birds until that group. You know what I mean? Until the 2020 spring hatch. You know what I mean? So I feel like the actual long-term lay rates and all that is out there. But I want to say, for anybody who's trying to breed for production, my lay percentage rate all of that stuff is super critical for me. That's how I make probably over 50% of my selection choices. So obviously I can't really compare what these birds were doing to what birds were doing 3 years ago on their Tractor Supply feed. That's just not fair. But if you're wanting to know your lay rate, if you don't change your heat feeding and your, then you're artificially lowering your, do you know what I mean? It's one thing to artificially raise your, but if you're, I feel like I was artificially lowering my annual lay rates by, basically the birds would stop laying as it got hot, and it gets hot here in May. Do you know what I mean? So I've gotten a full, we're into June 6th and my birds are starting to slow down, mostly the older ones, but my birds under 3, there's been no decrease in their egg production in the last month. You know what I mean? That's, I was able to push that out even further. So that ups my lay rates, which makes me happy. As something that I'm working with.
You're going to keep feeding them to see how far they go, right? I mean, you're going to keep giving them layer or breeder or whatever.
Yeah, as long as they're laying. Well, right now I have everybody housed singly. So some birds can be on layer and some birds can be on holding. So that helps me, so as long as they're still, that's my key right now. If they're still laying, then they can have the layer feed, but they don't deserve it if they're not laying.
Okay.
All right. We do have some questions. Let's see. You always have to do, what about feeding them their eggshells for calcium?
It's fine. I don't feed them back as like a whole shell or a cracked shell. I pulverize them or break them up and kind of blend them in. You can sprinkle them on top. Some old wives' tales say that feeding eggshells back to them increases the chance of egg eaters. I'm not sure about that, but I don't want to take the chance. So,
you do any sterilization or anything in between? Or
no.
Okay.
No.
There's no cooking them in the oven. There's no. Okay. All right. Just checking.
Yeah.
All right. And then the age-old question of how do you stop them from wasting their feed? So this guy wants to know wasting the pellets, searching for crumble. So I'm assuming he's feeding a mash, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that the feeder height is not correct. So if the lip of the feeder that the bird has to reach over to get feed needs to be level with the average bird's back. I see a lot of people leaving their feeders sitting on the ground, and that's not a good thing. So both feeders and waters need to be elevated to level with the average bird's back. If you're using nipple waters, of course, they need to be above their head, but anything else that they're drinking from, bell waters, fountain waters, whatever, the lip needs to be level with the average bird's back. I think most times when somebody talks to me about wasting, it comes back to appropriate feeder height. It really does. And if they continue to waste after that, then there's a feed quality issue to consider. It's probably time to change feeds.
And I, not only feeding height, but I know it seems silly, but I use the 5-quart hang-on feeders, even for my single bird. So, I mean, it can hold a gallon of water, and I'm putting 6 ounces of feed because I have big birds in the bottom of that thing, and they don't spill a drop. I mean, do you mean because it's so deep inside the feeder that, the feeders are skinny but deep, and I mean, they just don't make any mess. So there's nothing on the ground. There's no problems with flies. There's no, so just think about, just because it says chicken feeder on the rack, think about trying something different.
Right.
That helps. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna let you go. I got to get to work. You have to get back to production. So, because we need your products. So,
we're working on it.
So, all right. Well, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good day.
See you, Karen.
All right. Bye. Yeah. This is the way to do it.